The soldier had just dropped his duffel bag when he witnessed something that would shatter his world completely. His daughter was crouched beside the horse feeding station, grabbing handfuls of grain pellets and desperately shoving them into her mouth, tears streaming down her dirt-covered face as she ate. How starved must a child be to consume animal feed like it's a feast? And what happens when the person responsible is the very family member you trusted most? The hollow sound of her tiny fingers scraping the bottom of the metal feeding bin filled the barn with desperate echoes. Nobody teaches a 7-year-old to feast on livestock grain. But when survival becomes your only teacher, even the most innocent hearts learn the cruelest lessons. She wasn't choosing this meal. She was clinging to the only sustenance keeping her from complete collapse. Staff Sergeant Alex Torres stood frozen behind the barn's splintered doorframe, the same wooden structure where he'd once carved his initials as a boy. 20 months of combat hadn't prepared him for this battlefield. Watching his own daughter reduced to eating what horses ate, his hands, steady enough to defuse bombs under enemy fire, now shook uncontrollably as he witnessed his child's desperation. His wife Maria had died in a car accident 3 years ago, and his sister-in-law Helen Vasquez had begged to take custody of Emma. She needs a mother figure, Helen had insisted, tears flowing freely at the funeral. I'll love her like my own. The monthly checks Alex sent from overseas were meant to give Emma the life he couldn't provide from a war zone. Instead, he'd returned to find his daughter eating horse feed while Helen lived comfortably off his military salary. From deeper inside the barn, a cold voice shattered the silence. Quit that crying and eat every grain. The horses don't complain about their meals, and neither will you. Helen Vasquez emerged from the shadows, no longer the grief-stricken woman who had wept at Maria's graveside. Her face had transformed into something harsh and calculating. She gripped a leather riding crop, its surface worn smooth from repeated use. I've warned you before, waste my cooking and you eat with the animals. That's what ungrateful children deserve. Emma's small voice trembled. Aunt Helen, please. I wasn't trying to be bad. The plate slipped when I was washing dishes because you're clumsy and worthless, Helen snapped. Your father sends money for you every month, but all I get is a burden who can't even clean properly. Now finish every piece of that feed, or you'll spend another night locked in the shed. The words hit Alex like physical blows. The woman who had promised to cherish his daughter was systematically destroying her. Worse, she was stealing his support payments while torturing his child. Emma looked up from the feeding trough, horse grain still clinging to her lips, and whispered the words that would change everything. Are you really my daddy? I've been waiting so long. Please don't let her hurt me anymore. Alex stepped out of the shadows, his combat boots hitting the barn floor with deliberate force. Both Helen and Emma froze at the sound. What the hell have you done to my daughter? His voice carried the deadly calm of a trained killer. Helen's face cycled through shock, panic, and then desperate calculation. Alex, you're early. Emma was just being disciplined for being hungry. Alex cut her off, his eyes locked on Emma's skeletal frame. My daughter is eating horse feed because you've decided she doesn't deserve human food. Emma scrambled to her feet, horse grain scattering from her small hands. Her thin legs could barely support her weight, and Alex noticed the way she instinctively cowered when Helen moved. How many times had his daughter been struck? How many nights had she gone to bed hungry, while Helen lived comfortably off his sacrifice? Daddy, is it really you? Emma's voice was hoarse from crying, from screaming that no one had listened to. The hope in her voice nearly brought Alex to his knees. This broken, starving child still recognized him as her protector, even after Helen had spent months convincing her that nobody cared. He could see the internal battle in Emma's eyes, wanting to run to him, but terrified of punishment for moving without permission. Alex knelt down slowly, keeping his movements gentle despite the rage burning in his chest. Yes, baby girl, it's really me. Daddy's home now. Helen raised the riding crop defensively, and Alex noticed the way Emma immediately flinched at the gesture. That single reaction told him everything he needed to know about how that crop had been used. You don't understand the situation here, Helen said, her voice taking on a manipulative tone. Emma has severe behavioral problems. She's destructive, defiant, ungrateful. She needs strict discipline to— The only problem here, Alex interrupted, standing slowly and stepping protectively in front of his daughter, is that you're a thief and an abuser. Those monthly payments I've been sending, $1,500 every month for 20 months, where did they go? Helen's face flushed red. How dare you accuse me of new Lexus in the driveway? Alex's voice grew colder with each observation. Designer handbag, gold jewelry, fresh manicure and highlights that cost more than most people's rent. Meanwhile, my daughter is eating horse feed because you've stolen every penny meant for her care. Emma tugged at Alex's combat pants with trembling fingers. When he looked down, she whispered so quietly he had to strain to hear. Daddy, she told me you died in the war. She said nobody wanted me anymore. The words hit Alex like a sniper's bullet. Helen hadn't just abused Emma physically. She'd tortured her psychologically, convincing her that she was abandoned and unloved. The depth of cruelty was breathtaking. I never stopped wanting you, Alex whispered back. Not for a single day. Every letter I sent, every phone call I tried to make. Did you get any of them? Emma shook her head, fresh tears streaming down her face. Aunt Helen said soldiers don't have time for kids who misbehave. Alex's hands clenched into fists. Helen had intercepted his communications, stolen his money, and convinced Emma that her father had abandoned her. It was psychological warfare waged against a child. From outside the barn, a voice called out, "Everything all right in there?" Margaret Santos, the elderly neighbor who had watched Emma's deterioration with growing horror, appeared in the doorway. Her eyes immediately took in the scene. The soldier in combat fatigues, the cowering woman with a riding crop, and most damning of all, the small girl with horse grains still clinging to her clothes. "Dear Lord," Margaret whispered, her hand flying to her heart. "Emma, sweetie, have you been eating the animal feed?" Emma nodded, unable to meet the kind woman's eyes. "Aunt Helen says it's all I deserve when I'm bad. She says real food is for people who earn it." Margaret had suspected something was wrong for months. She'd seen Emma picking through her garbage cans on trash day, had noticed the child growing thinner despite the regular military support payments Helen received. But like many neighbors, she'd hesitated to interfere in family business. Now she felt the crushing weight of her inaction. "You poor baby," Margaret said, tears streaming down her weathered face. "How long has this been happening?" "Since Christmas," Emma replied in a voice barely above a whisper. "When I broke Aunt Helen's favorite vase trying to dust it. She said clumsy children don't deserve Christmas dinner, so I had to eat with the horses. Then she said I liked it so much, maybe I should keep eating with them." Alex felt his vision blur with rage. Christmas had been 6 months ago. His daughter had been systematically starved for half a year, while he'd been sending money believing she was being cared for. Margaret's face hardened as she turned to Helen. "You monster. I've seen those military support checks delivered every month, $1,500 each time. Where has that money gone while this child wasted away?" More neighbors began gathering at the barn entrance, drawn by the commotion. Word traveled fast in their small Texas town, and the sight of a returned soldier confronting his daughter's guardian had drawn attention. Mrs. Chen from the corner house arrived with her teenage son. Old Pete from the gas station shuffled over. Sarah Williams, who taught at the local elementary school, pushed through the growing crowd. "This is none of your business," Helen snarled, but her voice lacked conviction. The growing crowd represented her worst nightmare, public exposure of her crimes. She'd grown comfortable operating in secrecy, confident that a 7-year-old's word would never be believed over hers. Alex knelt beside Emma, his large hands gently brushing horse grain from her matted hair. The tenderness of the gesture contrasted sharply with the fury burning in his eyes. "Baby girl, I need you to tell these people the truth. Can you be brave for Daddy? She made me sleep in the barn when it was cold," Emma said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "She said the house was for people, not animals. She locked me out there for 3 days when I spilled soup because my hands were shaking from being hungry." The crowd's collective gasp was audible. Several neighbors pulled out cell phones, some calling police, others documenting the scene. Sarah Williams, who had noticed Emma's absence from school and been told she was homeschooling, began taking notes. "She told my teacher I was sick, when really, she just didn't want anyone to see how skinny I got," Emma continued, gaining confidence from her father's supportive presence. "And when you sent me letters, Daddy, she burned them in the fireplace. She said dead soldiers don't write letters, so they must be fake." The methodical cruelty was staggering. Helen hadn't just neglected Emma. She'd orchestrated a campaign of psychological torture, designed to break the child's spirit completely. Before anyone could react further, a sleek sedan pulled up outside the barn. Jennifer Walsh, Helen's daughter and Emma's biological aunt, stepped out wearing expensive clothes and jewelry that seemed obscene given the circumstances. "Mother called me," Jennifer announced, surveying the gathered crowd with obvious annoyance. "Said there was some kind of misunderstanding about Emma's care." Alex stood slowly, Emma clinging to his leg. "The only misunderstanding is how your family could justify stealing my money while starving my daughter." Jennifer's expression remained cold. "Emma has always been difficult. She requires special handling. We've been providing structure and discipline that you've been torturing a child," Margaret interrupted. "Look at her. She's nothing but skin and bones." Jennifer shrugged. "Children her age are naturally thin. Besides, military families receive adequate compensation for childcare services. We've simply been efficient with resources." The calculating way Jennifer spoke about Emma, like she was a business transaction rather than a human being, sent fresh rage coursing through Alex's veins. "Get off my property," he said quietly. "Both of you now." Helen stepped forward, still gripping the riding crop. "You can't just show up and take her. I have legal custody. Courts don't favor soldiers who abandon their children for years at a time." "Abandon?" Alex's voice rose for the first time. "I've been serving my country while sending you $1,500 a month for Emma's care. Money you've stolen while feeding my daughter horse grain." Sheriff David Martinez pushed through the growing crowd, his face grim as he surveyed the scene. He'd known Alex since high school and had been getting calls about the commotion for the past hour. Behind him came Deputy Rodriguez and paramedic Lisa Chen, both of whom took one look at Emma and immediately understood the severity of the situation. "Alex, good to see you home safe," Sheriff Martinez said, his voice heavy with the weight of what he was witnessing. Then he turned to Helen, his expression hardening. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to explain why this child appears to be severely malnourished and why there are multiple reports of her eating animal feed." Helen's composure finally cracked under official scrutiny. "She's being dramatic. Children exaggerate everything. I've been caring for her perfectly well with the resources provided. She's just difficult." "Difficult," Sheriff Martinez repeated slowly, his eyes taking in Emma's protruding ribs visible through her torn dress. "Ma'am, I'm looking at a child who appears to weigh maybe 40 pounds soaking wet, wearing clothes that are falling off her body, while you're standing here in designer shoes that cost more than most people make in a month." Paramedic Chen was already kneeling beside Emma, gently checking her pulse and examining her obvious signs of malnutrition, severe dehydration, significant weight loss, possible vitamin deficiencies. She murmured to Deputy Rodriguez, "This child needs immediate medical attention." The crowd murmured agreement as more damning details emerged. Margaret stepped forward. "Sheriff, I've been watching this situation deteriorate for months. That little girl has been getting thinner and thinner, while Helen's been living like a queen off those military support payments." Teacher Sarah Williams spoke up. "I was told Emma was being homeschooled due to behavioral issues, but looking at her now, I can see why Helen really kept her out of school. Any teacher would have reported this immediately." Old Pete from the gas station cleared his throat. "I seen that girl digging through dumpsters behind the grocery store. Thought it was strange, but Helen always said the kid was just different. Now I see what different meant." Other neighbors began sharing their observations. Emma scavenging in garbage cans during the early morning hours, sleeping in the barn during cold Texas winter nights, doing manual labor that would challenge an adult twice her size. The picture that emerged was of systematic torture disguised as discipline. Mrs. Chen spoke through tears. "My daughter Jessica used to play with Emma before she just disappeared from the neighborhood. Jessica kept asking why Emma never came outside anymore. Now I know why." Helen looked around desperately as the circle of witnesses tightened around her. Every face showed disgust, anger, and shame at their own inaction. She was no longer just facing one angry father. She was confronting an entire community that had failed to protect a child and was now determined to make amends. "You don't understand," Helen pleaded, her voice rising to a near shriek. "She's not normal. She's destructive and defiant and ungrateful. I had to use firm discipline because her father abandoned her and left me to deal with a damaged child. The accusation of abandonment was the wrong thing to say." Alex stood slowly, Emma safe in his arms, and his voice cut through Helen's hysteria like a blade. I sent $1,500 every month for 20 months, $30,000 total. I tried to call every month, and you told the phone company I was dead. The only person who abandoned Emma was you. You abandoned your humanity. Jennifer made one last desperate play. This is all very emotional, but the law is clear. We have legal custody, and this man abandoned his parental responsibilities. Emma belongs with us. Emma, who had been silent throughout most of the confrontation, suddenly spoke up in a voice that carried across the entire gathering. I don't want to eat horse feed anymore. I don't want to sleep in the cold. I just want my daddy to take me home. The simplicity and heartbreak in her words hit everyone present like a physical force. Several neighbors were openly crying. Sheriff Martinez removed his handcuffs. Helen Vasquez, Jennifer Walsh, you're both under arrest for child abuse, neglect, and fraud. You have the right to remain silent. As the handcuffs clicked into place, Helen made one final vindictive statement. You think you're saving her. You'll ruin that child just like your wife did. Some people aren't meant to be parents. Alex had endured months of combat, had watched good men die, had survived explosions and enemy fire, but hearing his dead wife's memory attacked while his daughter stood covered in horse grain pushed him beyond his breaking point. He stepped forward, and for a moment, everyone thought violence was inevitable. Instead, Alex knelt down and lifted Emma into his arms. You're right, he said to Helen. Some people aren't meant to be parents. Thank God Emma finally has one who is. The legal proceedings moved swiftly once the full scope of Helen and Jennifer's crimes became clear. Video evidence from neighbors' phones showed Emma's skeletal condition and Helen's callous attitude. Medical documentation revealed severe malnutrition, dehydration, and evidence of physical abuse. Bank records demonstrated a clear pattern of Helen using military support payments for personal luxury while her charge starved. Dr. Patricia Vance, the pediatrician who examined Emma at the hospital, testified that the child showed classic signs of prolonged abuse and neglect. In 30 years of practice, I've rarely seen a case this severe, she told the court. This child's body shows evidence of chronic malnutrition over many months. The psychological trauma may take years to fully address. The prosecution presented a devastating case. Helen had received $30,000 in military support payments, while Emma's medical records showed she hadn't seen a doctor in over a year, despite Alex's insurance covering all medical expenses. School records revealed Helen had withdrawn Emma, citing behavioral problems right around the time neighbors first noticed the child losing weight. Jennifer's involvement deepened the charges. Text messages recovered from her phone showed she was not only aware of Emma's treatment, but had actively participated in covering it up. One particularly damning message read, "Mother says the kid is getting too thin. Maybe feed her more horse grain so she doesn't look so obvious." During Helen's testimony, she showed no remorse. Instead, she continued to paint herself as the victim of an ungrateful, difficult child. Emma was impossible to manage, she insisted. She was destructive, defiant, and showed no appreciation for the home I provided. Sometimes strong discipline is necessary. The judge, Honor Margaret Blackwell, had presided over family court for 20 years, but even she seemed shaken by the evidence. "Mrs. Vasquez," she said during sentencing, "you were entrusted with the care of a vulnerable child whose father was serving our country overseas. Instead of providing love and protection, you systematically tortured that child while living luxuriously off money meant for her care." Helen received 7 years in prison for aggravated child abuse, fraud, and theft. Jennifer, whose role as an enabler had allowed the abuse to continue, received 3 years probation and was ordered to pay $15,000 in restitution, half of the stolen support payments. But the real victory wasn't measured in prison sentences. It was measured in the weeks and months that followed, as Alex watched his daughter slowly return to life. The first breakthrough came 2 weeks after Helen's arrest. Emma had been staying with Margaret Santos, while Alex found them a proper home. And one morning she asked a question that stopped everyone in their tracks. "Is it really okay if I eat breakfast even if I haven't done any chores yet?" The fact that she had to ask permission to eat showed how deeply Helen's abuse had damaged her understanding of basic human rights. But asking the question also showed she was beginning to believe she might deserve better treatment. "Sweetheart," Alex said, kneeling down to her level, "you never have to earn food. Food is something you get because you're my daughter, and I love you. Chores are things we do to help each other, not because we have to earn the right to exist." Emma nodded slowly, processing this radical concept. For 20 months, she'd lived in a world where basic needs were privileges to be earned through perfect behavior. Learning that love and care could be unconditional would take time. 6 months later, Emma had gained 22 pounds and grown 3 inches. Her laughter, which Alex had thought might be lost forever, began returning in small bursts of joy that grew stronger each day. But the healing process revealed just how deep Helen's damage had gone. Emma would hoard food in her bedroom, hiding crackers and fruit just in case. She would apologize constantly for breathing too loudly, for stepping on a creaky floorboard, for existing in the same space as others. She would flinch whenever anyone raised their voice, even in excitement or laughter. Dr. Rebecca Torres, the child psychologist Alex found, explained that these were normal responses to prolonged trauma. Emma learned to survive in an environment where any action could result in punishment, she told Alex during one of their sessions. Teaching her that she's safe now will take time and patience. The breakthrough moments came gradually. The first time Emma asked for a second helping at dinner. The first time she laughed at a silly joke without looking around nervously to see if someone was angry. The first time she fell asleep without checking 3 times that her bedroom door was unlocked. Margaret Santos, who had become a surrogate grandmother, was instrumental in Emma's recovery. She taught Emma to bake cookies, to tend a small garden, and most importantly, to believe that mistakes were learning opportunities rather than crimes deserving punishment. "When I was your age," Margaret told Emma one afternoon as they planted tomatoes, "my grandmother told me that flowers don't grow straight up to the sun immediately. They grow a little each day, sometimes bending toward the light, sometimes getting knocked down by storms, but they keep growing anyway." Emma absorbed this wisdom with the intensity of a child who had been denied gentle guidance for too long. "Even if they get knocked down." "Especially if they get knocked down," Margaret confirmed. "That's when they need the most care and patience to grow again." The old barn was completely renovated into a bright playroom where Emma could read, draw, and simply be a child again. Alex couldn't bear to leave any reminder of his daughter's darkest days, so the horse feeding station was removed entirely and replaced with bookshelves, art supplies, and a comfortable reading nook. Community support continued long after the court case ended. Sarah Williams, the teacher who had testified, worked with Emma throughout the summer to prepare her for returning to school. Old Pete from the gas station would wave enthusiastically whenever he saw Emma, making sure she knew she was welcome and valued in their community. The Chens invited Emma for regular playdates with their daughter Jessica, helping her relearn how to interact with children her own age. At first, Emma would stand frozen when other kids laughed or ran around energetically, but gradually she began to join in their games. Dr. Torres worked with Emma twice a week, using play therapy and art to help her process her trauma. Some sessions were difficult. Emma would draw pictures of herself locked in dark spaces or eating with animals. But other drawings showed her progress. Pictures of herself smiling, playing with friends, and most tellingly, images of herself and Alex together with the words safe and loved written in careful 7-year-old handwriting. Alex struggled with his own healing process. Survivor's guilt plagued him. How had he failed to realize what was happening? How had Helen managed to deceive him so completely? The knowledge that Emma had spent months believing he was dead, believing she was unwanted and unloved, haunted his dreams. "You can't change the past," Dr. Torres reminded him during their family sessions. "Emma doesn't need you to carry guilt about what happened before. She needs you to be present for what happens next." Learning to parent a traumatized child required Alex to develop new skills. He had to learn to read Emma's subtle signs of distress, to provide comfort without overwhelming her, and to create structure that felt safe rather than controlling. Military discipline had prepared him for many challenges, but healing his daughter's heart required a gentleness he had to cultivate. One evening, as Alex tucked Emma into her new bed in their new apartment, she looked up at him with clear, healthy eyes. "Daddy, do you think the horses miss their food?" Alex's heart clenched, but he managed to smile. "What do you mean, sweetheart? I ate so much of it. Do you think they went hungry because of me?" The fact that she was still worried about causing others pain, even after everything she'd endured, showed Alex that Helen hadn't managed to break his daughter's generous spirit. "Baby girl," he said gently, "horses have plenty of food. And you never ever have to worry about being hungry again. Daddy's home now, and I'm never leaving you." Emma nodded, then reached under her pillow and pulled out a drawing she'd made that day. It showed a man in military uniform and a little girl standing in front of a house with the words "Our Home" written in careful 7-year-old handwriting across the top. "I drew this for you," she said. "It's us, and we're safe." Alex hung the drawing on the wall where he could see it from his own bed. Some nights, when nightmares about Emma's ordeal woke him in cold sweats, he would look at that picture and remember that they had both survived their separate wars and found their way back to each other. 2 years ago, I never thought we'd be here, Alex says, watching Emma take her final bow on stage. Her voice, her smile, it's like she's shining from the inside out. Margaret squeezes his hand gently. "Maria would be so proud," she whispers. Alex nods, his throat tight. She would, of Emma, of all of us. As Emma runs up, beaming with joy, she shouts, "Did you see me, Daddy? I was brave." "I saw you, sweetheart," Alex replies, lifting her up. "You've always been brave." Walking out of the school together, Alex thinks. Some stories don't end with battles or courtrooms. The best ones end with healing, with love, and with a child who finally feels safe. This story reminds us that heroism isn't always found on battlefields or in grand gestures. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply refusing to look away when a child needs someone to care. And sometimes the most important victory is teaching a broken heart how to trust again. If this story moved you, hit like and subscribe to Soldier Dad Stories for more incredible tales of fathers protecting their children. Tell us in the comments, have you ever had to trust your instincts to save someone you love? Your story might help another parent, because every child deserves a hero in their corner.